Hi, I'd like to welcome you to another conversation about art. My name is Alan Constant. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm here with Paul Rowland, who is in Tokyo, Japan. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Jacqui Fehl, a mixed media artist from Asheville, North Carolina. So, welcome, Jacqui.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, glad to have you with us today. I just want to jump right into our questions for you. The first thing I'd like to ask you is about your background in art. How long have you been creating art?
Well, I've really been painting for maybe 10 years, if that. I actually started my career for the longest time. I was in Hollywood and I worked as a stand-in and dialogue coach for children on sitcoms.
Hmm.
And so there was a lot of hurry up and wait and a lot of time on the set. So I started beading and knitting and just doing things to fill the time while you're waiting around. And then I did a lot of voiceover work, and technology allowed me to leave LA and live anywhere I wanted to. So my husband and I, we packed up. We got to Asheville, North Carolina, and I was able to set up a home studio using a home audio studio using this technology, which actually now is obsolete, which is kind of funny, and started doing voiceovers. Well, in between those sessions, I get bored. So a few feet away, I set up like a little painting studio. I had no idea I would ever become a professional artist. It was really just to fill the time, but I found that I absolutely loved it. I was terrible, but I didn't care. I was terrible. Um, but the difference with creating art versus doing all these I do a ton of character voices and voiceover work. Even though I was giving life to these characters, I was still reading somebody else's words. So there was a part that I couldn't express myself beyond what was written on the page. So painting allowed me to do whatever I wanted. And I loved that freedom. And so I just kept painting because it was fun. And social media was just kind of starting, or probably it was around. I had just discovered it. I was a very late to Facebook, and this is way before I joined Instagram, and just started joining some art communities and painting. And people were like, "Hey, can I buy that?" Like, what? Sure. And then I just kept doing it. And it was funny because the voiceover industry has dramatically changed. And so my voiceover career was supporting my art hobby. And now it's flipped. So my art career, I still do voiceovers, but not to the volume that I did before because the whole industry has changed. So now it's totally flipped. And that's kind of how I started.
Do you have any kind of training in art? Have you taken classes in art?
Online workshops, a
Hmm.
couple of in person, like a day or two. I have no art training whatsoever, except just that, and lots of experimenting and falling down and saying, "Ooh, that's awful." Paint over it.
So now let's look at some of the pieces that you've sent me. So this first piece called Ballroom.
Yes.
When you started, did you have an idea in mind, or did you just start and to see what would happen?
Well, I knew that I wanted to start with a simple shape of a ball or a circle. I didn't want to worry about what am I going to paint, but I didn't know what they would look like or what would happen. So I basically would build up, I paint on a lot of papers, and then I tear them up and I collage and I paint over them and then sand them back. So I knew that I had these circles, and that kind of freed me up to say, I don't have to think about that. And so I built up this background, created these circles, but then I wanted to make sure that the circles were playing well together. So there wasn't one, they were different enough from each other, but there wasn't one that was a standout. I wanted the eye to move around. So when you look at this from far away, you do see these balls, But when you come up close, then you really see the fine lines, the little faces that are kind of hidden in there, that one face, and then there's a jumping lady up there. So I wanted the painting to be impactful from far away and then also close up. And then I just kind of kept going, and then this ball was better. That means that one needs to be up its game. And okay, now that one's good. Uh-oh, now this one's absolutely the wrong color. So it's kind of that dance of playing around. And once I felt satisfied, I'm like, yep, there we go. That's it. That's done. That one is, I believe, 24 by 24. And it's on wood. It's cradled wood panel, which is actually my favorite substrate because you can beat it up really well. I love to sand, and I'm pretty hard on my surfaces.
I love the playfulness and your willingness to try different approaches and different kind of media.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a curious artist. I am never satisfied. I always want to try new things. That lights me up. Just trying new things. I'm just so people always say, "Oh, I can always tell your style," even though my subject matter is varied, because I get not bored, but I'm kind of, oh, squirrel. What's that? Oh, I want to do that. So I'm not an angsty artist. I'm a joyful artist. So I want people to be happy when they see my work, or not be happy, but find some joy in it. It's not very dark art.
On these 12 balls, it looks like there's a lot of collage in it. So the collage,
yes,
line, and painting, all those kind of elements are happening.
Yes, my materials are pretty much house paint, artist grade paint, pastels, graphite, paint markers, collaged papers that I usually make my own papers. I put them together. I don't use magazines or anything like that. And let me see, ink, and they all play together. Like I don't even probably use materials the right way. I just let them go at it.
Jacqui, from the beginning, from the introduction, I was struck by your background in acting, as a voice actor and a voice coach. And I'm
Yes.
always so interested to find out, other jobs, background, of artists. There's always like a connection, and I love hearing your playfulness and yeah, just the way you're experimenting in your art. What, is there like a connection between acting, that kind of performance and expression, and what you do with your artwork? For me, there seems to be, but how do you see that?
Exactly the same thing. It is kind of a performance. The difference is I don't have control of, like, once you release your art into the wild, what people take away or what they think about it, I have no control over that. Whereas when I'm, let's say, voice acting, I can make this, I'm present, although of course, if I'm doing that's not true, I guess. If I have a project, I'm not live doing it. So once the voiceover is released, I guess it's kind of the same as painting. But it is certainly performance, just not live performance. And it's also expressing yourself.
Do you feel like you're making any kind of social or even political commentary?
I'm not sure. I don't set out to do that. What I kind of feel like the way that I feel sometimes like I'm a storyteller, but I don't tell the whole story. So maybe it's just the title and I let the viewer make up the story. I never just come out and say, this is what this is about, because then there's no discovery. I love when people respond to my art and they see something that I didn't even see, and they connect in some way, which then connects me to them. And I love that. That's probably the most joyful part of the art, when somebody says, oh, And that, what is this? And oh, I see that. And does this mean this? And well, it does now. I love that. So yeah, I don't think I'm blatantly, except for that one piece, making a statement, but no, maybe a little.
It seems like there's certain icons or symbols that run through your work, like grids and circles, and we'll get to some of your bottles. I see bottles come up a lot. Are there, can you say something about those symbols, or are there other symbols that you find yourself exploring in your work?
Sure. So I love abstract art. I absolutely love abstraction. But for me, my paintings, I usually have something either realistic or recognizable, like a shape that for me grounds the painting. So it's not, I'm not like one just to paint surface. There are some people out there that just do, one of my studio mates does, it's all about the surface. And even though I love surface, I want something grounding in there that's recognizable. So I just, circles and balls are just pleasing to me. I don't know really why, but they're also kind of like, these are kind of like wheels. And so they represent for me, so these homes are on wheels and it's like a connection to each other. And it doesn't matter where you are, it's that connection. So these houses can go anywhere, but they're connected. There's some lines that you can't really see that connect them on the top. It's hard to see, but it's their relationship to each other. And so that's what the circles kind of are. They're usually happy balls or recognizable shape or wheels. And here I use windows also to have some sort of realism juxtaposed with the abstraction of the houses or the shape of a house. And this also was a paint over, by the way. It was a really, really busy, colorful piece, and there's very little of it remaining. And I was so frustrated. I just started throwing paint around, whiting it out with the idea that I was going to just gesso over it. And it painted itself. This is one of those times where I was so delighted with the white space in there. This is one of my favorites. Yeah. And that writing is the Tao Te Ching from there.
Well, now you've got my attention. I'm fascinated by Taoism. Why did you choose that text?
Well, I use text a lot, sometimes where you can read it, like I will use Gray's Anatomy. And I also use an old etiquette book from like the 1950s telling men how to dress and what women should be doing when their husbands come home. I find it so funny. But most of the time, I just love the look. I guess people call it asemic writing.
That's right. That's right.
Writing. Yeah. So I love that. I love the shapes of letters. I love just the looseness of not being able to read it. And I just loved the shapes of those characters. My brother gave me the book, the Tao Te Ching, and I just thought it was so beautiful. I didn't want to tear it up. So I took a photo of one of the pages and then printed that out.
Hey, let's take a look at the next one. This is called Holding Space for You.
Yes.
This is more abstract than the last couple we looked at.
Yes, this also was a paint over, complete paint over. It had one of those silhouette figures underneath. This was on canvas and I was just done. I just had to work it. This is the one that I have no idea how I did it. I slapped paint on with no agenda, except once I started, adding paint, again, I want the eye to travel around. I don't want one part to dominate. I want the, value, all of those things. So I would do one mark and then I would do another and then I would slap it on. The drips came and then I used a lot of scratches and sanding. And when I was done, I stepped back, and this was completely not intentional. I saw a figure, a face, almost like it's a woman bending over a pregnant belly. there's the face.
Oops.
And that big white space was either an empty belly that she's holding space for a future child, or I wasn't sure. She's holding space for somebody. And again, it wasn't supposed to be figurative. And I never told people that I saw that face because I didn't want them to see that unless they saw it. That was just my reaction to it. And that's why I called it that. That's where the title came from, was holding the space, because it was kind of about that space in the middle where all this stuff is going on around it. And actually a friend and fellow artist who would always say, oh my gosh, I just love that. I just love that. I just love that. Well, she sold a big painting. And next thing I know, I get a Venmo out of the blue and she bought it. And she said it's her favorite painting and it's hanging in her dining room. And when another artist buys your work, for me, oh, that just blows me away. Okay, so I was invited to participate in a group show, and the theme was games. I thought, games? Why would you ask me to be in this show? I have no idea what to do. This is actually my second one that I've ever done. So I talked to my husband who does woodworking and resin, not for a living, but it's just a passion of his. And I said, okay, this is what I came up with, this idea that I wanted to do a take on tic-tac-toe, which is such a simple game, but I wanted to make it more complicated, complex, and make a social statement. So he engineered it for me. So it's in an interactive piece. So all those people move. They have magnets inside. So you can pick them up and place them in the game board. And so instead of tic-tac-toe, it was John, Jane, Doe. So they're kind of, if you look at these people, they're not very clear cut. They're kind of ambiguous and blended. And so instead of X's and O's, you play the game with people. So not only do you have to get 3 in a row, but you have to remember who your people are, which is not so easy. So the suggested games, as you can see there, are introverts versus extroverts. So introverts would be the X's, and the extroverts would be the O's. So you just pick one category to play. And what's so interesting is watching people play. So I have this up in my studio, and people come and they say, oh, well, what is this? And I just say, oh, it's a modern take on tic-tac-toe. I explain a little bit and I listen while they play. And it's so interesting to hear people's, I don't want to say biases, but for lack of a better word, biases come out. So let's say they're doing optimist versus pessimist. The guy in the middle, someone will say, oh, optimist. So, oh, well, why did you choose that? Well, he's smiling, or Democrats versus Republicans. It's very interesting. They always pick the young white guy in the bottom. Oh, Republican. Really? Why do you say that? And it's just fascinating. And just to watch them play and see why they choose people, why they choose people. And the first one that I did was, different people, obviously. It was a little bit smaller, and this couple from New York came into my studio and were playing it, and they were fascinated. And they said, oh my gosh, we host dinner parties all the time. We entertain. We want to buy this and put this in our apartment so that our guests can play this as kind of an icebreaker, or maybe not. So they did that for their guests, and it was so exciting that somebody, it's a very unique, it's going to take the right person to connect with something like that. Not very commercial, but yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
A lot going on, but also kind of a grid.
Yeah.
But I don't like things to be too perfect or precious. As you will notice in my work, it's all, there's splatters and scraping and no straight lines. So this again was kind of taking a grid, but busting out of the squares themselves. But there's the idea that the squares are there, but they're imperfect. And again, a lot to look at. Far away, you see I hope you see the value, the lights against the darks, the colors. But when you come up close, that's when you see the lines, you can see the text, and the horse. And so it's not a big piece. It's only 10 by 10. And that's currently at my studio as well.
You talked about scraping and scratching. Like, can you tell us about some of the tools you use to do that?
Sure. I use a sander, a little round sander. I use sandpaper when I really want to control it a little bit more. Control. If I'm working on a smaller piece, a little gentler, I use a screwdriver and pull through. That's pretty much what I use for this, to pull back layers. I don't really mask, like use tape much, or, masking. I want to try that a little bit, but that seems a little too perfect for me to get that straight line. Although I love people that do it. I love their work, that do that technique, but I think that probably isn't me, but I appreciate it.
Jacqui, you really seem to like interaction and engagement with people
Yes.
in your work.
Yes.
I wonder, you must get some of the same questions and responses again and again, which is nice, and it shows a genuine curiosity. But are there questions or things or topics that you would love people to ask you about? Are there conversations that you haven't had that you really would like to have?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I don't know. I like when people tell me their response more than asking me what does this mean? I don't really want to tell anybody what it means, because what it means to me is different from, I don't want to spoon feed them. I want them to discover and make it their own, especially if they're going to purchase it. I want them to feel a connection to the piece without me having to tell them, because I don't even know a lot of the time. I don't set out usually, okay, John Jane Doe was different. I obviously had to plan that. But a lot of the pieces, I don't know how they're going to turn out. So I don't say it's not like this is this and that's all it is. This is this. I even my still lifes, it's never going to be this is a flower in a vase. It's going to be not that uh, easy to pinpoint exactly what it is. So I don't know if that answers your question. I guess I just like to hear them tell me why they like it.
On this piece too, could you just briefly take us through how you put this together? I assume you started with a paint background, and like there's text, there's the horse, there's different elements. So did you kind of build on the white background?
No, I went the opposite. So the background was very bright and colorful, and lots of elements on top of each other. And then I wanted to take away. I love, I want to use more white space, white in my work, because I love it. But sometimes I can't help myself. I just grab more colors and I fill the space. But I love, for me, when there's white space that makes the other things stand out. So I just started covering things up. And as I covered things up, then I go back and I add things. So like that orange pastel, that's on top, the upper left corner. So there's that orange shape, but then I wanted to add on top of it. So then I put the pastel on top of that. Then there's graphite that goes into the white part. The scratches and scribbles are on top of the white. It starts busy, then I cut it back, and then I add again on top of it. And the drips, like the black drips, obviously was not the background. That came after, because I didn't want just that black to be in that corner. There was too much contrast there. It would pull the eye there. So I brought it down into the other parts of the grid, so to speak. And that's really how a lot of when I'm working is I do something and then I have to respond to it. So it's not really planned, because I don't know. And what, where is it not balanced? How would I make this better? I don't know the answer. I try things. Something very different.
Very different, yeah. But again, that's where I love your playfulness, to move from one type image to another image and just try new things. And yeah, because we haven't seen flowers before.
No, and but if you notice the mark making in the back, there's the text, which is actually that Handwriting is a book that I got from Goodwill. It was Beethoven. It was a book about Beethoven. Of course, I didn't want to tear up the pages, but I loved his handwriting. I couldn't read it, had no idea what it said. So I took a photograph of it, digitally altered it, but I just love his penmanship. So I used that. So again, it's got my same elements of not precious marks, that kind of thing. There's stripes, but they're not perfect. So you can see that I sanded through some of them. They're different widths. There's no like logical order of the colors. But then the roses, again, kind of ground the abstraction and give it some point of realism. Again, that juxtaposition between abstraction and something that's recognizable excites me. And then what's so different about this piece, this is a tiny piece. I was enthralled with encaustic. So, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But I don't want to do encaustic work and I don't want to paint with encaustic pigments, but I like the look of it. So I used it in an unconventional way. I created a mixed media piece that's not oils, even though there is oil pastel. And I sealed it in such a way that I protected everything. And then I tried my hand at encaustic. So I covered it in that hot wax. Do I know what I'm doing? No, but it's okay. I'm sure somebody would say, you can't do that. You're supposed to do this. And I did it. It's fine. It was so fun because I have no control over that wax. It's really hard because you got to heat it and work really fast. I love the challenge of that. So that was fun for me to try something completely new.
The next one. Oh, here are the bottles.
Yes.
So talk about bottles. What do they mean?
Same thing like I did with the circles. This is called vessels. I forgot which one. I have a few of them. And this one sold. So I wanted to pick a shape again and a grid. And I didn't want the bottles or vessels to be perfect. I had no idea I just knew a shape, but I wasn't sure how the shape was going to turn out. So again, I thought of a grid, but not having exact perfect squares. So again, I created this background of just anything goes. There was painted papers, there's some text. Again, all my usual go-tos, even though again, this is a new subject matter, it's still my same marks and papers and all of that. So I built this extremely busy background. And then I just started to either reveal a shape by painting on top or like paint around the shape to create the shape, like that yellow bottle kind of in the middle in the second row. I painted around the paper to reveal that shape. But then the bottle next to it, I created the shape on top with pastel. So I'm either going backwards or forwards. And I have no idea what's going to happen. But as I'm going along, the same questions. Is this bottle stealing the show? How do I bring somebody over here now? I've got all this orange over here. How do I bring that, maybe just a tiny bit of orange in a pastel to bring it up to that corner? So it's a constant dance for me of keeping all the bottles exciting, independent, but playing well together. Does that make sense? That's kind of the process. I didn't know where it was going to go, but I just started out with the idea. These are vessels. And then let's just see what happens. And vessels could be us, humans. a lot of what I do is they kind of represent us too. Again, how we play together, how we are in community, our differences, our diversity makes us interesting. If for me, if these bottles were all exactly the same, I would be bored creating it. I love that they're so different. For me, the beauty is in the diversity and in the flaws. They're not perfect. They're crooked. That's us. That's humanity. That's the beauty of being human.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Grid.
Wow.
Also, not perfect squares. There's things that are off center. There are things that break through the square, like that daisy pushes the, it invades the square below it, or lots of shapes, the same process. Each square had, if this square is too good, well, then this one needs to up its ante. So I didn't plan anything except I knew I was doing squares. Had no idea how they were going to turn out. Again, trying to get the eye to move around. Those three-dimensional, I don't know if you can see those. There's three, those are my palettes. Do you see those three circles that are in the center? There's like one on a pink, yep, one on the blue and one on the green. So I use some yogurt containers to mix paint when I'm making a lot. And if I just need a little paint, I use the lid. And I love them as a design element because, again, they're circles, really interesting. But I couldn't create that without, I mean, I couldn't create that intentionally. That's just colors that I was mixing that are kind of the history of that square. And I love the randomness of it. And I thought, why not attach them as a design element? So my palettes, my process becomes part of the creation. And once again, the Beethoven text is in the pink dot white square there. The human, they're all squares, like we're all flesh and blood, but they're all different. Some are neater than others, some are more precise, some are all over the place. Again, it's just kind of that connection. They're all community, they're all attached. Just like humans, we're all kind of, we're humanity, but they're all expressing themselves differently.
I was just thinking about how well you integrate things and combine things. And I love it when you talk about storytelling as well, which, is another kind of performance and it needs other people. And I was also struck by how you have your own studio, but you also work in a kind of a public studio with some other people. Do you ever, I mean, how do you interact and do you ever collaborate with other artists? It just feels like that would be something right up your alley.
Well, I'm about to. So I've got a small solo show coming up called Be Still, which is my take on still life, pushing the boundaries, thus the bottles. Kind of how can I change still life and make it exciting for me? I don't paint from life. I don't paint a bowl. It's all coming out of my imagination. So my public studio is this big, beautiful, it's gorgeous spot in the River Arts District, and it's a large space and it's expensive. So I have 3 subletters. So there's 4 of us in the space. So I have kind of the center space, and then they have these little rooms that are open. We're all open to each other. So we have privacy, but we're also connected. And one of the artists, the one actually who bought that other piece of mine, who does a lot of surface, she created this painting with oil and cold wax. And I haven't been working in oils very much at all. And she was like, yeah, yeah. And I said, oh, you know what? I see kind of like flowers in a pot. And she said, oh, I wasn't painting that at all. And I said, oh, I really like this. I would take that further. She said, go ahead, take it. And I said, really? She said, take it. And I said, okay, I can do whatever I want on top of it. She said, yep. I said, okay, this is going to be a collaboration for us and it's going to be in my show. So it's been sitting in my studio. I'm looking at it. I'm terrified because it's not just mine. And with oils, I can't use my normal go-to materials. I have to paint with oil. or oil sticks because you can't use acrylic on top of oil. So I'm going to be completely out of my element, and it's very exciting. So that's going to be a collaboration.
That's really, really interesting.
Is there a certain palette that you like, certain colors that you're drawn to?
I seem to reach for the same like greens, oranges, golds. I love black and white. I hardly ever use purple. I don't know why. And I used to use pink a lot. I'm trying to restrain a little bit from the pink because people, you either love it or you hate it. And there's a little bit of pink in there. I couldn't resist. It doesn't go, but I kind of liked it because it doesn't go. It's just a random pink mark that came through when I sanded that little spot there. So I did the pastel, then I put that kind of grayish concrete color over it, and I sanded, and the pink came through. And I said, okay, you know what? You're staying. You don't really fit in there, but you want to be here, obviously. So welcome. And again, the grid, and she's kind of stretching out of, kind of don't box me in. She's just stretching, kind of being her glamorous self. That's why I chose that image, because these boxes are just refusing to be complete squares. They're just not going to do it.
This is called Reinvention 2.0. So is it referring to the female figure stretching to something new and different?
I did a few reinventions, yeah. And a lot, the first one I did kind of had a female very like walking, really like strutting her stuff, just in her power. And I was thinking about, also when I paint over things, I think this was a paint over as well. I'm reinventing what was, and you can always reinvent. Any day is a new day. Just start over and be who you want to be. Make the painting you want to paint. I love the idea of reinvention. We're never just static and stuck. We're always changing. We're always, or I hope, always exploring and evolving.
And this one, another grid, summer vacation.
Yep. Just, I always title them after. I never start with a title. It's always what comes to me, what I think about. And those two just looked like they were on some beach. They're kind of vintage. And there's my palette again, a yogurt lid. Same tech, the balls, you can see them breaking out of the squares. So there's a lot of things I do over and over again.
And here's some more bottles, vessels.
Yep. Yep. This was a paint over again. I painted over one of the first paintings I ever did. It was on plywood, and I had it professionally framed in this god-awful frame. And I hated it. And I don't know, it was in the house hidden somewhere. I pulled it out, and I hate to waste substrates. I said, oh, I'm going to paint over this. My husband said, well, are you going to tape over the frame? I said, nope, I'm just going to go. I hate the frame, so I'm just going to make it part of the painting. I had no idea where it was going to go. Again, still life. I wanted to explore vessels, but I wanted to explore a limited palette. So I was very careful. I didn't let myself go crazy. It's called, it's 11 because you can see 9 very easily. There's one that's kind of a line in the center, that's 10. And then there's a tiny little pencil one in the white. Yep, that's number 11. So again, you have to come up close. So the interaction with that is, I'm telling you, there's 11 vessels, but from far away, people are saying, no, there's not, there's 9. Oh, wait, no, there's 10. Oh, wait. So it's that discovery. They're involved in the process they're involved in the creating of this piece. It's more than just what you're seeing. It's discovering it.
So Jacqui, thank you for taking us through those pieces. That was, I learned a lot, and it helped me to see your work in a whole new way. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. It's such an honor. I know you've interviewed some really well-established, fantastic artists. So it's quite an honor to be included. I appreciate that so much.